Lisa Kudrow is making headlines again, but this time it's not for a reunion, a cameo, or a nostalgic throwback. It's for something far more uncomfortable, far more revealing, and honestly, far more real. Because decades after Friends became one of the most beloved sitcoms of all time, Kudrow is now opening up about what she describes as brutal behavior from the show's writers, and the details are forcing fans to look at this iconic series in a completely different light. Lisa Kudrow, who played the eccentric and lovable Phoebe Buffay, recently reflected on the early days of Friends in interviews that have now gone viral in 2026, and what she shared wasn't the warm, cozy behind-the-scenes story many fans expected. Instead, she describes an environment that could feel harsh, critical, and at times deeply uncomfortable, especially during the show's formative seasons in the mid-1990s. According to Kudrow, the writer's room and the table read process were where this intensity was most visible. Table reads, which are typically a standard part of sitcom production where actors perform the script aloud in front of writers and producers, were not just casual run-throughs. They were high-pressure moments where every joke, every line delivery, and every pause was scrutinized in real time. And if something didn't work, Kudrow says the reaction wasn't always gentle. She recalled that when a joke fell flat, the feedback could be blunt to the point of feeling humiliating. There wasn't always a soft landing or a collaborative discussion. Sometimes it was just immediate, sharp criticism. Kudrow described that tone as brutal, not necessarily because the writers intended to harm, but because the environment didn't always leave room for vulnerability, especially for actors still finding their rhythm. And here's where the story takes an even more uncomfortable turn. In the same wave of reports that resurfaced her comments, Kudrow also spoke about inappropriate conversations happening in the writer's room, conversations that involved discussing sexual fantasies about female cast members. She pointed out that the writing staff at the time was largely male, and that kind of behavior, while perhaps brushed off in that era, would be viewed very differently today. That detail alone has sparked a huge reaction online, with many fans expressing shock that something like this could happen behind the scenes of such a widely adored show. Others, however, have pointed out that the 1990s television industry operated under very different cultural norms, where boundaries that are now clearly defined were often blurred or ignored entirely. To understand why Kudrow's comments are hitting so hard right now, you have to remember what Friends represents. Premiering in 1994, the show quickly became a cultural phenomenon, turning its 6 main cast members into global superstars. Alongside Kudrow were Jennifer Aniston as Rachel Green, Courteney Cox as Monica Geller, Matt LeBlanc as Joey Tribbiani, Matthew Perry as Chandler Bing, and David Schwimmer as Ross Geller. Together, they created a show that defined a generation, blending humor, relationships, and everyday struggles in a way that felt relatable and timeless. For years, the narrative surrounding Friends has been overwhelmingly positive, a story of cast camaraderie, equal pay negotiations, and a rare level of unity in Hollywood. But Kudrow's latest comments add complexity to that narrative, reminding us that even the most successful shows are built in environments that aren't always perfect. Kudrow made it clear that the harshness she experienced was most prominent in the early seasons. At that point, the cast was still relatively new, still figuring out their characters and still adjusting to the demands of a weekly sitcom. The writers, on the other hand, were under immense pressure to deliver hit episodes consistently. That pressure created an atmosphere where efficiency and results sometimes took priority over sensitivity. And yet, Kudrow doesn't present herself as a victim in this story. In fact, one of the most striking parts of her reflection is how balanced it is. She acknowledges that while the environment could be tough, it also pushed the cast to improve. The constant feedback, even when it felt harsh, forced them to sharpen their comedic timing, refine their performances, and ultimately elevate the show. Over time, she says, things changed. As Friends grew into a massive success, the power dynamic shifted. The cast became more confident, more established, and more involved in the creative process. The tone in the writer's room softened, collaboration increased, and the kind of brutal feedback she described became less common. This evolution you can actually see when you watch the show from start to finish. Early episodes have a slightly different energy, still funny, still charming, but not quite as polished as the later seasons. By the time you reach the peak years of Friends, the characters feel fully realized, the humor feels more organic, and the performances feel effortless. Kudrow's comments suggest that this transformation wasn't just creative, it was also cultural within the production itself. Still, the resurfacing of these remarks in 2026 is sparking a broader conversation about how we view legacy shows through a modern lens. Fans are asking important questions. Can you love a show while acknowledging its flaws? Can you celebrate its impact while also recognizing the challenges behind the scenes? On platforms like Twitter and Instagram, reactions have been divided. Some fans are defending the show, arguing that high standards and tough feedback are part of any creative industry. Others are saying that Kudrow's revelations highlight issues that were long overlooked, particularly when it comes to workplace culture and gender dynamics. There's also a wave of appreciation for Kudrow herself. Many are praising her for speaking honestly, especially at a time when conversations about workplace behavior in Hollywood are more important than ever. Her willingness to revisit these experiences decades later adds credibility to her perspective. It doesn't feel like a complaint, but rather a reflection. And then there's the emotional layer that comes with revisiting Friends today. The show's legacy has taken on new meaning in recent years, particularly after the passing of Matthew Perry in 2023. The cast has spoken openly about their bond, their shared history, and the deep connection they built over 10 seasons. Kudrow's comments don't contradict that bond. They actually highlight how much the cast went through together to create something so enduring. It's also worth noting that despite these revelations, Kudrow has consistently expressed gratitude for her time on Friends. She's proud of the work, proud of the relationships, and proud of the show's impact. But she's also honest enough to say that it wasn't always easy, and that honesty is what's resonating with audiences right now. And meanwhile, Friends continues to thrive in the streaming era, finding new generations of fans on platforms like Netflix and Max. For many viewers, especially younger ones discovering the show for the first time, Kudrow's comments are shaping how they understand its legacy from the very beginning. And that might be the most important takeaway from all of this. The magic of Friends isn't diminished by these revelations, it's contextualized. It becomes a story not just of success, but of growth, resilience, and the reality of working in an industry that demands excellence at all costs. Because behind every perfectly timed joke, every unforgettable scene, and every iconic moment was a group of people navigating pressure, criticism, and expectations, all while trying to make millions of viewers laugh. And now, with Kudrow's candid reflections, we're seeing a fuller picture of what it took to create one of television's greatest shows, a picture that includes not just the laughter, but the challenges that made that laughter possible. So, as this story continues to unfold and spark conversations across the internet, one thing is clear: audiences aren't just interested in the nostalgia anymore. They want the truth. They want the real stories behind the shows they love. And when someone like Lisa Kudrow speaks up, people listen. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more celebrity updates just like this.